For those who don't know me, my name is Prizger Gonzales. I had this idea to bring my friends together so I could learn from them. I was tired hearing them only in 30-second spurts. I'm having a good time today and yesterday. I'm going to take my turn and talk about what I do, my passion. I enjoy my work as a historian, and my field of study is China, especially China in the 21st century. I've written 3 books on China. One is The Beginner's Guide to Doing Business in China. The first time I went to China, and I went to the trade shows, and I saw how easy it was to do business. I says, I have to share this knowledge. And with this book, this book is becoming a classic, because you could buy this book and you could land in China and you could take a subway. I tell you everything about how to get around in China, and most important, how to find under one roof all the sources and manufacturers that you're looking for. And this book is my baby, really. It's called The Beijing Maestro. It's glorious to be rich. It's really the history about how China got rich. And a man called Deng Xiaoping, the man I coined with the sobriquet, the Beijing Maestro. Because after the horrors of Mao Zedong, the Beijing Maestro wrote an economic melody for China. And the lyrics in his melody is, it's glorious to be rich. And in 30 short years, China, some say they're the second. I personally think China is the richest country on earth. I say that because America, the United States of America, is the greatest debtor nation in the history of the world. As of this moment, the US government has a deficit of $17 trillion and counting. So they're printing money. And if China is the banker, I don't see how they could be second, because they're not printing it. But that's my take on it. But the Chinese, as humble as they are, don't like being second, because they just don't like to make waves, they just like to make money. In the 14th century, China was doing a massive, massive trade with Africa. There was a Chinese emperor called Emperor Yongle from the Ming Dynasty. Emperor Yongle had a eunuch that he trained to be a renowned admiral, Admiral Zheng He. As far as historical, I guess the word icons, he's one of my favorite. Zheng He traversed the oceans of the world. Some said he even came to America. But that's another topic for another time. But most important, in the 14th century, China and Africa was doing massive, massive business. On behalf of Emperor Yongle, Zheng He brought back all the chiefs and leaders of Africa to China, to the imperial palace for a banquet. And those of us who are familiar with Chinese culture, if a Chinese invites you to lunch, that's okay. But if he invites you to dinner and a banquet, that means you guys doing a lot of business. There was a conservative movement in the imperial court that advocated that China should be isolated from the rest of the world. They claimed we are the celestial dynasty, we are the middle kingdom, we live under heaven's sky, we don't need anything from anyone. Emperor Yongle fought that for a long time, but after he passed, the conservatives in the royal court won the day and China became isolated. They felt good about it because in the 60s the Black Panthers used to call white people devils, but way back in the 14th century the Chinese were calling Europeans barbarians. They wanted no involvement with the barbarians across the Western Ocean. Now the Western Ocean is called the Indian Ocean. So they turned their backs to the world. In my opinion, as a historian, that was their fatal mistake. Because until that time, China, for centuries and centuries, was always the richest nation on earth. In fact, in 18 out of the last 20 centuries, China has been the richest nation on earth. Two exceptions. 19th century, when the nations of Europe became rich, and 20th century, the United States of America, when the United States became the richest nation on earth. While China was isolated, the Industrial Revolution in Europe was taking place. And I must say, the root of the Industrial Revolution is because of the African Moors. The African Moors gave Europe algebra and mathematics, and they ran with it. Cicero, when he went to England, he found the Saxons so ignorant, he says, I don't even know if I can make them slaves. But it just shows when you self-strengthen and you have a will and resolve, even you could dominate the world. Based on the Industrial Revolution, England and Europe carved up the world. They terrorized the world. They killed a lot of people. A lot of people. Canada went. The Native American died by the millions. Central and South America, millions died. Brazil is now Portuguese. Most of South and Central America is Spanish. The Aztecs were wiped out. The Native American, he's gone. Africa was divided up. Leopold from Belgium, he used to drink grogs of whiskey because Africans was his playground. He could kill them at his will. But that's the history of what the Industrial Revolution gave Europe. It gave them weaponry and modernity as far as weapons. China was the next big prize. But before they got to China, the Europeans killed off with the Aborigines. They went to New Zealand. Then they went to India. They turned India into opium addicts first. But they were always salivating at this big Chinese market that they couldn't crack. China used to boast, we don't need anything from you. We live under heaven's sky. We are the celestial dynasty. You are barbarians. Go away. But the Chinese compromised and they gave a little enclave in south of China, a city called Guangzhou, one of my favorite places on this earth. They had a little enclave in Guangzhou where the barbarians couldn't go into the interior of China. But the English, having planted their flags all over this world, were determined to get a piece of China. They couldn't trade with China, but they had a trap. The Indians were cultivating the poppy fields. Out of poppy, you get opium. So the English drug dealers, government sanctioned drug dealers, were persistent in their determination to get a piece of the Chinese market. But the Chinese came down hard, locked them up, destroyed all the little bits of opium that they were trying to smuggle in. But they sent word back to England, to Parliament, the House of Lords. The Chinese don't want to trade with us. The House of Lords passed a law declaring war on China. And when the English came with their modern weaponry, China was unprepared. That long eastern coast of China, when the battleships showed up, first time the Chinese were seeing steamships with cannons on it, they slaughtered a lot of Chinese. The Chinese had to surrender. After the English made their first move, the Germans came. The Polish Navy and Army came. Italy came. Austria. France. They all came and they had a cute word for seizing Chinese territory. They called it concessions. And then they started to turn the Chinese into opium addicts. But the Chinese call that the Opium Wars. They also call it 100 years of humiliation. They have never been humiliated like that before. Although maybe Genghis Khan and his sons from Mongolia, they conquered China for centuries, and they even outlasted the great Genghis Khan and got back, and they gained back their country. But while China was experiencing the 100 years of humiliation, on the ground level was always a determination to self-strengthen. China began to self-strengthen. They were determined that this was never going to happen again. It will take them a long time to get there. But the self-strengthening movement went through a lot of changes. But I'll fast forward and let's go up to Mao Zedong, one of the baddest men ever walked this earth. Amen to that. Mao was a bad man. But Mao was bad in a very sophisticated way. Mao had just beaten back the Japanese and Chiang Kai-shek. In 1949, he had a country to run. Close to 1 billion people. America had the atomic bomb. Russia had the atomic bomb. And Mao says, yo, what am I going to do about this? But he cold-bloodedly used the peasants of China He sacrificed them. Millions of poor Chinese died at the altar of Mao Zedong. Why? Because in order for Mao to get Russian technology and weaponry, he had to pay Russia in food. So Mao marshaled all the Chinese and said, you got to grow food. You can't eat it because we give it to Russia. We got to give it to Russia. So Chinese were eating leaves and barks, and they were dying by the millions.
Okay, cool. I got you.
Folks look at Mao and they thought he was crazy. But he told the world, I have nearly close to 1 billion people. I could sacrifice 300 million to save China. That's as cold-blooded as he could get. And he did it. After all the horrors of Mao, from the Cultural Revolution to the Red Guards, Mao was determined to crush the passive psyche of the Chinese so a new person really could evolve. His slogan was destruction before construction. I'm going to destroy it and I'm going to build it back. We in the West really can't really comprehend that. But he did it. Well, we're going to fast forward from Mao and go to my man, Deng Xiaoping, the Beijing maestro. I'm awed by Deng because when Deng took over from Mao Zedong, China was poorer than Africa. They were poor. Millions were eating leaves and the barks of trees. They said hundreds and hundreds of miles there were no leaves and trees because the people were eating it. That's how poor China was. But Deng Xiaoping had a melody, an economic melody. And he told the Chinese, it is glorious to be rich. And I'm going to show you how to do it. The first thing he did, and Dr. Jones mentioned that yesterday in his talk, he reached out to the Chinese diaspora. I'm from a little village in the island of Trinidad, and we had one shop in the village, and it was a Chinese man. And he opened 365 days per year, religiously. He never argued, he never raised his voice. He just opened his shop for the village could eat and shop. All of these people contributed. As a matter of fact, in every nook and cranny of this world right now, anytime a cash register goes cha-ching, cha-ching, China has a piece of that sale. It's an amazing story. And it happened, as Dr. Jones mentioned yesterday, in 30 short years, the Beijing maestro turned around China and they got behind him and they were determined to regain wealth and power. And never again is China going to be invaded by barbarians from the West. Next, he went to Japan. As we might know, some of us, Japan is an archipelago of islands. Sometimes, psychologically, I think they wish they were a continent where they could really run things. But that's their burden. But they wanted to rule the world. But Japan wasn't handicapped like China. They sensed and smelt the Industrial Revolution happening, and they sent industrial spies to Europe, hundreds of them. Go see what the Europeans are doing and bring back that knowledge. In a few short years, Japan had warships that they could fight against the Americans in the Pacific. They bombed where? Pearl Harbor. They had everything. But prior to that, the Japanese have always emulated China. Their language is Chinese, their culture, their religion, their architecture, Chinese. But the Japanese have a little bit of a chameleon in them. They'll shift gears in a minute and change. So they made the move before China. In fact, when World War I was happening and Europe had to get out of China from the concessions, Japan moved in and invaded China. They wanted China badly. But Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, the Beijing maestro, don't forget, with the help of the atomic bomb by the United States, saved China's ass. But coming back to with the Beijing maestro, he went to Japan because folks in China were saying they invaded us. Why are you going there? He says, if you're ugly, it makes no sense pretending that you're handsome. They got knowledge that I need. I gotta go and get it. And he got it. The deal the Beijing maestro made with Japan was a simple barter deal. In those days, but the Japanese was just getting to turn us into consumers, all of us. They were getting ready to sell us televisions and electronics and cars. China had steel, China had iron, China had coal, China had gas. The Beijing maestro went to Japan and he said, I'll give you this. All I want in return is you come and share your technological knowledge with me and help me build my infrastructure. No money was passed. Ironically, that's the same deal China is giving Africa. And ignorant people in the West are calling China's names. They're trying to recolonize Africa and neocolonialism. Prizger Gonzales says nonsense. It's a good deal. Africa needs to be developed. China has the know-how. You have oil. I'll take your oil and I'll build you roads. The problem with Africa is African leaders take the money off the top. The Chinese multiply the money. Brother Sekou, Dread, as business people, all of us, we all know all the money in the cash register is not yours. You got employees to pay, you got bills to pay, you got to even pay the city of Chicago. You see the trucks around, what's the name? Internal. No, there's some trucks around that collect money for Chicago.
Revenue.
Exactly. Legal stick up those guys. But, you know, I'll get back to Africa. But let's stay on the Beijing maestro for a minute. He made that deal, and it resurrected the economy of China. But one more word on Mao. Before Mao died on his dying bed, he made a deal with Nixon and Henry Kissinger. Nixon was this famous American anti-communist. But Mao will romance the shit out of you. And he set up Nixon, actually. He invited Nixon. Nixon went to China. But he played the Americans against the Russians, and he played the Russians against the Americans. He told Nixon, yo, you know, I'm cutting ties with Russia, you know, so I think we should become friends. Nixon went down in history as the man that opened up China. And China became friends with the United States. And that is significant because it opened up China to get American know-how. Before Mao died, the deal wasn't finalized. But the Beijing maestro came to America to sign and seal that deal. When the Beijing maestro landed in Texas, he put on his cowboy boots, his 10, 20-gallon cowboy hat, and everybody was lining up because he knew he had close to 1 billion people, customers. So Coca-Cola wanted a piece of the action. Everyone wanted a piece of China. But the deal he made with the United States is that he said China is open for business and we have cheap labor. And any businessman would tell you that business is not nationalism, business is profit. As a matter of fact, I would announce now that I worked out a deal for Frontline Books to print 200,000 copies of a book called The Wise Mind. Let me see that book. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. And but the price that we getting in China for 200,000 copies of this book, I ain't telling nobody. National security. But this book, we printing 200,000 copies, you know, in China. But that, I'll let Sekou tell you about that when he takes the microphone. But I'm only making that point to say that business is not nationalistic. Business is not a patriotic thing. Business is profit and loss. And if we as a small business in Hyde Park could look at China to get a better price, you know, the big corporations are doing it long before us. That's a fact. So Deng came and he set up America because he knew what I just said, that business likes profit. China had a lot of communes. Dr. Jones talked about the communes. But the communes were ready. So instead of, he brought American business, all this area, what's called the Western, what, the industrial belt? Or the Midwest.
Midwest. Yeah, yeah.
All the factories from the Midwest went to China for price. Deng Xiaoping says, you're going to get the Chinese price. But the subtle deal he made is that when the Americans came with their industry, the Chinese learned it all. And they learned how to clone, and they learn how to duplicate. They are masters at that. So after that happened, in 30 years, China became rich. Now, how did that happen? Dr. Jones yesterday talked about the Beijing Maestro's 4 modernizations. China knew to really and truly self-strengthen and to become powerful and rich again, they had 4 modernizations. Honestly and truthfully, it didn't originate from the Beijing Maestro. It originated from another original Chinese romancer, Chou Enlai. But the Beijing Maestro took it off the shelf and put it into action. The 4 modernizations was 1, agriculture. How to modernize and bring a scientific, productive approach to agriculture. National defense. Never again would China be conquered by anyone. And if we have to buy, borrow, or steal, we're going to know and be able to make every weapon on the face of this earth. And today, from a machete to a drone, you could get it in China at a better price. The third part of the 4 modernizations was industry. Very important. Nearly everything that we consume in the United States, it could be Point Forte in Trinidad, Charlotte Street, Lagos, Rio de Janeiro, Paris, Nairobi, Kenya. I don't care where you go, 90% of the merchandise is made in China. Industry. And the third was science and technology. When Deng landed here, he cut 1 deal with every nation on the earth. Let my students come and study. We see the Chinese around University of Chicago. They're all under the radar studying. You go to Germany, you see them. You go to Paris, you see them. You see them in the University of the West Indies. You go to England, they're there. Every university in this world, the Chinese have their students studying anything that's new, modern, and cutting edge. They're not going to be left out. This takes me to China, Africa, and the 21st century. My argument is that China miracle, the economic miracle, should be duplicated by Africa. Africa shouldn't reinvent the wheel. They should clone China's 4 modernizations. Every African is high-lifing with a cell phone. Everyone. I say learn how to make it. Africa has to save themselves by putting science and technology up front. Dr. Jones says yesterday that he called it the Deng Xiaoping theory. He's absolutely right. You cannot graduate from college or university in China unless you study the Beijing Maestro economic theory. My argument, without any apologies, is that Africa should duplicate it. But whereas China is one nation, basically one language, Africa is 56 nations. Tribalism. Tribalism. Everybody wants to be the chief. Brother Sekou is going to be talking about the rebirth of Pan-Africanism. I'm a Pan-Africanist. Because as Brother Sekou says, if Africa is strong, the diaspora is strong. If the diaspora is strong, Africa is strong. And believe me, folks, if the Tea Party of the United States ever got these three branches of government, African Americans will be the first they're going to throw under the bus. And what's going to be sad about it is that Africa, the Africans in the United States and in the diaspora have been taught to demonize Africa. The Chinese know better. When you look at it, the majesty of Africa, the United States, India, even China could fit in Africa. It's an amazing thing. But Africa has a lot of demons. We've been brutalized and terrorized, dehumanized. We've been turned into somebody's image and likeness. Honestly, few of us know who we are. There's a lot of water under the bridge. We have a diluted spirit. But there's a Calypsonian in Trinidad, a Rasta man called Black Stallion. He says, the more Africans you kill, the more Africans come. I'm only saying that to say there's hope. But there's good stories in Africa. Angola. Angola went through as much hell as China. Blood was running like water in the streets. Today, Angola is one of the richest nations on earth. But Angola can't do it by themselves. Africa has to unite. If Africa becomes united, it's going to be a different world. It's going to resurrect all of us. All of us is going to ride that rhythm. A lot of folks tried it. Kwame Nkrumah, Emperor Haile Selassie, Du Bois, George Padmore. Sekou will be able to speak more on this. But folks have tried it. But the little sweetness that the West really gave to us, cars, television, the remote, we forgot about Africa. But I am forecasting the way that I analyze the world. There are a lot of one-hit wonders in this world. Spain is a one-hit wonder. France is a one-hit wonder. Portugal is a one-hit wonder. England is a one-hit wonder. And the jury is out on the United States to see how they make out in the 21st century. The jury is still out. But Africa has a chance if they duplicate China. 4 modernizations. And eventually, out of that, Pan-Africanism might emerge, hopefully. But 21st century Africa and 21st century China, they are still miles apart as far as production and wealth and poverty, and prosperity. But there's hope, there's always hope. So folks ask me all the time, why China? Well, 18 out of the last maybe 20 centuries, China has been the richest nation on earth. As I might have said previously, on two exceptions, 19th century Europe and 20th century the United States of America. And when I analyzed the Chinese, I could envision them economically running this world for the next 2 centuries. Easy. Yeah. But for the past week, the Chinese president was in South America. He is building roads from the Pacific in Peru to the Atlantic in Brazil. High-speed trains where you could get on a train and go 300 miles an hour and get to Brazil from Peru. They're doing it all over the world. Now, to me, that is the essence of a real capitalist. So don't let anyone tell you China is communist. China, the Chinese are the smartest capitalists walking this earth now. They know money more than anyone else. They knew money before we knew money. They knew money before America was a dream. So we have to respect that. And the same way that what the Chinese learned from the United States of America, I think it will be important that we in the West learn from China. I must say, I don't know if you want me to share it, but Dr. Jones is a legitimate scholar for decades. He has been studying the Chinese model. How did China get rich in such a short time, and what we in the United States could learn from it? As Dr. Jones says yesterday, Gary, Indiana has been poor for decades. Nothing is done about it. Why? Detroit and many other enclaves in the United States is poor. Yesterday I mentioned I was in Arkansas and Mississippi, and the poverty blew me away. Black people are staring in space, not knowing what to do or who they are or where to turn. But as Dr. Jones says yesterday, China got a new thinking. You have to change your thinking. How you look at the world, how you approach the world, and understand this is the 21st century. I was talking to some friends recently. I says in the 60s had a signature. But the 70s you knew you lived in the 70s. But in the teen years of the 21st century in America, what is the signature? Could anybody help me? What, Facebook?
iPhone.
iPhones. There's no signature movement. But here in Hyde Park, we planting some seeds. So there's always hope. I thank you.